Hello, and welcome to the Imago Nutrition Podcast. My name is Mark. I am one of your hosts. I'm here with Danielle Glesney, my business partner, sister-in-law, dietitian extraordinaire. Danielle, how are things in the St. Louis area?
Very good. Very good. Thanksgiving's
we're
around the corner and it's frost on the ground.
I know. It's definitely moving from fall into winter-ish, that's for sure. So as we're recording this mid-November in 2022. So we have an interesting question today. And so this is the podcast where we answer your questions and give you practical nutrition strategies to help you and your family flourish. And so if you have been curious about the trustworthiness of claims made on food packaging, this is the episode for you. And so we hope to kind of clarify and give you some strategies or some ways to think about some of these claims or some considerations and equip you with perhaps a more appropriate methodology for ascertaining some of the values in these foods that we consume and are marketed to us pretty heavily by companies. And so anyways, all that's to say, if you have a question, you can always send us your question. You can do so by going to our website, Imago Nutrition, IMAGO nutrition.com/podcast, imagonutrition.com/podcast. And when you go there, you'll see a web form where you can fill out your question. You can send it to us, and we will consider it for a future topic of an episode. And so with that, here's our question for the day, as I alluded to. The question is, when looking at food packaging, how do I know which claims I can trust and which are just marketing? Great question. And for those of you that have met me, you may already know this. For those of you that have not, you may not. I am a marketing director by trade currently. So I have been in marketing in various industries my entire career since 2003. And so I have a deep passion for marketing, but I also have frustration, of course, with marketing, particularly when it comes to some of the nutrition side of things, fitness side of things, certainly the supplement side of things. Like that'll be a whole nother episode someday where I probably have the most amount of frustration with marketers in the supplement industry. And I, at one point, worked in the supplement industry. So I come from a bit of a credible position on that. And so all that's to say, we're not going to get too deep into that or any specific industry, but just know too that I'm not anti-marketing. We're not anti-marketing by any means. Again, I've made a living off marketing. And so I love marketing, but we want to work through this idea of claims that are made on food and what are the validity of those, what are the trustworthiness of those. And so, Danielle, why don't you kick us off by taking us through how to think through this? Again, the question is, when looking at food packaging, how do I know which claims I can trust and which are just marketing? So how do you approach this topic, or how do you think about these claims on food packages?
So the front of the food package is where you'll have claims like good source of vitamin C or good source of fiber or organic or low sodium. That's typically what you find. Those are those health claims. And those are typically on the front. And then when you turn it on the back, obviously you have the nutrition label with, serving size and the number of grams or milligrams in that serving. So what's interesting is some of the claims do have specific definitions. So for example, like sodium-free or salt-free means that the product in one serving has to have less than 5 milligrams, or very low sodium means 35 milligrams or less per serving. And so it's kind of hard to remember those specific definitions. It would be best to actually know kind of what your goals are and what you need. So if your goal is lowering blood pressure, you would need to know your sodium goal for the day. If your goal is losing weight, you would need to know your calorie goal for the day. If your goal is, heart health, it could be sodium goal, fiber goal, and fat goal on those nutrition labels. So the answer to your question, Mark, is really to always turn the package over and look at the nutrition label so you can see those numbers. I think, those health claims are nice to get your attention, but we still need to think about your specific overall goals and what those numbers are on the back of the label. So first thing, obviously looking at the serving size. So the serving size and the numbers on the label would only mean you get 5 grams of fat if you have that serving size. Obviously you'd have more, if your serving size is larger. So speaking of fat, one goal to think about just for heart health is choosing 5 grams or less per serving on the nutrition label. The next highlight I would talk about is sugar. So thankfully they give us a new nutrition label, which makes the sugar a lot easier to understand. So in the past, it was just total sugars. And then there would be, some lines under that. Now they have switched it to total sugar and how many grams of added sugar. So I don't recommend looking at the total sugars at all, because that is including the natural sugars that we find in our dairy called lactose and our fruit called fructose. So only looking at how many grams of added sugar on the nutrition label and not the total sugars. And so with that, you want to know that 1 teaspoon is 4 grams. So 1 teaspoon is 4 grams of added sugar. So you would just divide that number, say it's 8, you divide it by 4, you have 2 teaspoons of sugar in this 1 serving of the product. Now, the goal is not 0 grams of added sugar a day. The American Heart Association recommends men to have 9 teaspoons or less of added sugar per day. And for women and children, 6 teaspoons of added sugar or less per day. So, there's some wiggle room. And I always like to think about that added sugar. Sometimes it's in a really nutrient dense food like kefir. So there's actually 8 grams of added sugar per serving of kefir, I guess, depending on which brand you buy. But think about in those 8 grams are 2 teaspoons out of your 6 or 9, how many health benefits you're going to get from that. You're going to get 12 probiotics, which is double the amount of the best yogurt on the market. You're going to get calcium, vitamin D, and protein. And it's a low-fat food, low-fat protein. So, so that's the added sugar. And then the last one to really look at on the nutrition label is fiber. So fiber, the goal is 3 grams of fiber or more most of the time. So when you're shopping, if you want to give your health an A, 90% of the time you're choosing those foods with 3 grams of total fiber or dietary fiber or more. So that means we don't need to be buying those Fiber One products to get our fiber goal, because one, that's going to cause a lot of GI distress, like bloating and things like that, uncomfortable pains. So getting your fiber from natural sources would be much better for your GI tract. And then you're going to get all the other nutrients as well. So just the 3 grams or more is all you do. You don't need to be shooting for, 15 grams of fiber in a product. So those are the highlights that I would say on the nutrition label, Mark. I know if you have diabetes, I would recommend looking at the total carbohydrates, because that is including everything in the sugar as well, is included into the total carbohydrates. So if you have diabetes and you're trying to watch your blood sugars, you don't need to be looking at the added sugar. That's just for heart health, which is important as well. But for, blood sugar control, you're just needing to look at the total carbohydrates, because everything below those is counted in. So I think it was really interesting to listen to a recent, well, it's not actually that recent, from the Journal of American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, how they studied nutrient claims and whether the claims on the front of the package increased consumers purchasing those products. And it was really interesting because Actually, there was no change from 2008 to 2012. So you can see we probably need to redo this study so we can see more recent, because I think there are more claims out there than maybe in that time frame. But some claims, such as low sodium, were lower in other products, but not always. So for example, if you had like a low calorie, I don't know, cereal, and then you compared it to something, another cereal, it doesn't necessarily mean it was low calorie amongst all cereals. They really can't take the time to compare all cereals on the market. It's more so like low calorie compared to one regular brand cereal. So a low calorie cereal may not actually be lower than the next one sitting right next to it. So that's why it's just really good to turn that box over and look at the nutrition label.
That's awesome. That's super
What do you
helpful.
think?
I'm having some mic issues too, so I hope that's not coming through on your end, but I was getting a little weird there for a second. So yeah, I think that's super helpful. And you mentioned it too. One of the big things, so apart from label reading, we kind of talk about it. I'm in books, full time. I work at a publishing company. And so, keep in mind that the front of a food package is a cover. Right? It's like a cover of a book. It's meant to grab your attention, to, in a good sense, sort of lure you in, entice you in with the story, with the message, with the benefit to you. There's in my line of work, we have something we call a felt need, right? Does it attach to a felt need, or does it poke at a felt need that you have? And so some of those marketing claims on the front are there to prod at a felt need. Oh, it's low calorie, it's low sodium. And those are things that resonate with us because we feel like we have a need to, of course, sometimes make healthier decisions. But as is the case with a book, you've got to get into the content in order to get into the details. And so that's what that label is on the back. So going from the cover to the content and understanding that. And I think you did a great job just giving us an overview of some things to look for in that. And you mentioned it, kind of one of my biggest thoughts is just everything in context, right? And so another lens, not only looking back at that nutrition label, understanding it, reading through, again, the calories, the fat, the fiber, the sugar, and have some fun with that too. Just kind of learn what's in your food, learn the ingredients that are being used and which foods you like that are more nutrient dense than others. But keep in mind that you alluded to this too, that everything is in context, right? And so a lot of times people say like, oh, I got the low calorie version. Well, the question is, what's your calorie goal for the day? Are you trying to lose weight? Are you trying to maintain weight? Are you trying to gain weight? Or it's high protein. It's super relative. Like I would say an egg is high protein. It's only 6 grams of protein though. A lot of people are shocked to figure that out, right? And then you could have a protein shake that says it's high protein as well, and that's 30 grams, right? You could have a bar, a nutrition bar of some sort, and it could say high protein and be 9 grams. And so it's really kind of relative. So the question is though, what's your protein goal for the day? And are you achieving that? Does that food help you get there in an efficient way? Good source of fiber. That's great. And you outlined some, a framework for that in terms of how we can think numerically. But again, in context, are you hitting your fiber goal? Like eating a bar that says good source of fiber doesn't mean you've hit your fiber goal for the day. And so all of that in context, I think, is just super key. And so again, not opposed to marketing at all. You just have to think a little bit deeper about some of these things. And I've got a couple terms too that come up most often, I think, in talking with folks and in seeing this in the grocery store. So I pulled out just 4 terms just to kind of give you an idea of, again, some of the claims being made, words that are being used, and a little bit of the context for those. So number 1 is natural. We see this a lot, the term natural on a label, and that's good. It's a good word, and so it generally elicits sort of a positive response in us in that felt need situation. But keep in mind that there's no formal definition, as stated by the FDA or the USDA, of what constitutes natural. So now the FDA has said in general, this means that there's no artificial or synthetic ingredients used. Again, in general, it's not enforced, but that's sort of a general guidance. But marketers take creative liberties with that. The USDA, they allow it on meat and poultry if it contains no artificial ingredients, must be minimally processed. The label must explain the term. And so you'll see, on a USDA product, it may say natural. And then underneath that, it may say something like no added colors or minimally processed or no dyes, whatever that is. So the term natural is a term used quite a bit. Just keep in mind, there's no formal definition. That doesn't legally or meet a specific legal criteria to be on that package. Another one is local. See this, there's a bit of a local movement. In fact, I think there's a term out there. I haven't heard it a lot, but I think there are some people that consider themselves locavores. And this is where they try to eat only food that is made within a certain distance of where they live, and they're locavores. I think that's how they pronounce it. Localvore, I don't know, something like that. But there's no definitive definition for that. There's no set distance, so it could be local and made hundreds of miles away at times, okay, in some states. And so keep in mind that term can be endearing because a lot of times we want to help our local community, but there's no regulated term or definition or use of that as well. So again, it's a liberty that marketers are using. Whole is a big one too, but there's no regulatory definition for what constitutes whole. Now, it generally refers to foods that are not processed or refined and don't have any added ingredients, but there's liberties that marketers take with using words like whole or saying whole grains or includes whole grains or made with whole something. And what happens is that as consumers, we tend to just see the word whole and think good. And perhaps sometimes we prefer that over something else. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean that food is bad by any means. It just means that we've got to be, again, a little bit more nuanced in how we think through some of these claims. And the last one that I pulled out has more teeth to it, is organic. So this is one that it has specific criteria, and it actually has a legal meaning per the USDA. Okay, but there's kind of three different buckets for organic. A lot of times we hear organic or we see organic, and we don't know that there's, even within that certifiable criteria, there are three different tiers. A lot of times, as long as we just read, no matter what it says, if it says organic, we sort of just put it into one bucket. Oh, this is organic and it's good. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying there's a little bit more nuance here. So if it says 100% organic, that means that food is completely organic. Now, that means that there are no conventional pesticides used in the agricultural process of that food, but that doesn't mean there's no pesticides. There is an approved list of pesticides with the USDA that these foods can still be considered organic while using approved pesticides. So that doesn't mean no pesticides. It means no conventional as it was in the past, but there are still certain pesticides, chemicals being used, and something can still be 100% organic. But all that's to say that's the first level, or the top level is 100% organic, completely organic. Then there's just organic. Now, most people assume that organic means 100% organic. It doesn't. It means that the product contains at least 95% organic ingredients, okay? And then there is also, I've seen the rise in this as the organic movement continues to grow. You see a lot more labels with made with organic ingredients, okay? Now, this has a numerical value attached to it as well. That means that at least 70% of the ingredients have to be organic. It's not 100%. It doesn't mean that the whole thing, all the ingredients in a made with organic ingredients food is 100% organic. And so, again, nothing against organic. We could probably do a whole nother episode at some point on, organic food selection, which one is worth the additional cost, which one is not, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure we both have thoughts on that we could compare our notes on. And if you're out there listening and you're curious about that, do us a favor, shoot us that question, and that'll bump it up on our priority list to get to it. And so all that's to say, I think we've got kind of some big takeaways. One, move from the cover of the package to the back of the package, okay? Start learning, for the sake of your health, for the sake of your family's health, start learning to read nutrition labels as a standard practice. It's kind of funny because, we're kind of nerds on this stuff. I'm a nerd. And so I've gotten to a point now where I don't even really see the front of the package anymore. Like I pick up food and it's just instinctual. It's right to the back. And so in preparation for this, I had to kind of just like walk through some aisles. I was at a gas station last night on my way to a soccer party, and I was just like scanning. I'm like, okay, what are some of these claims in the grocery store or gas stations were on the front of the label? Because it's just so instinctual for me. Is I pick that up and I just go right to the back. And so it doesn't mean you have to be, that nerdy, but moving from those front claims, the book cover, if you will, to the content or to the back of the book is super important. Number two, just on the terms, just understand that these terms, if used appropriately, have more nuance than we often think. Okay. And so organic doesn't mean all organic all the time. Whole doesn't mean anything specific. Local doesn't necessarily mean it was made within 5 miles of your house, right? Natural doesn't mean necessarily what the FDA or the USDA would hope that it means. And so all that's to say, think through that with discernment. And then 3, just remember everything in context. Remember that having a snack that says high in protein doesn't necessarily mean you hit your protein goal. Having a bar that says lower sodium doesn't necessarily mean you didn't go over your sodium intake for the day. Because keep in mind, if you have enough low sodium snacks, you can still go over 2,300 milligrams or the 1,500 milligrams we're all trying to kind of work within. And so keep all of this stuff in mind, keep it in context. As with many things in life, there's more nuance. There's a little bit of discernment required. And so hopefully that's been super helpful. So those are my thoughts. Danielle, anything to wrap us up? Any last words of wisdom?
No, that's really good. I guess I was just thinking about like the layout of the grocery store and how they'll put the milk in the back, because that's the most common needed ingredient maybe. Mm-hmm. So they get you to go through the whole store. And I personally love the pickup option. So I'm no longer having to go through the whole store all the time. I think the end caps, are often, marketing to grab your attention, some easy grab items. And I did talk about that in one of the articles on our website of 12 ways parents can create a healthier environment for their children.
Very cool.
If you wanted to check that out. It's just not often nutrient dense food sitting there grabbing our attention.
Right.
But I think one thing is always said sometimes by clients I work with is don't shop in the middle of the grocery store, just shop the perimeter. But really you have the whole grains and you have your heart healthy oils, and there's a lot of good things in the middle. So we don't need to be afraid of any part of the grocery store. Just thinking about knowing, like we talked about. I love how you summed it up in those 3 or 4 points, knowing what your goals are and looking at the back of the label.
Very cool.
Don't be tricked.
Well, don't be tricked. Exactly. And by the way, grocery stores are getting smarter, and they've heard that mantra too. Just shop on the outside aisle. So they've moved things around. They've been doing this a while. There's a reason they're successful at it. And so, don't be afraid of the middle. There's a lot of good things in the middle. So, with that, I think we did it. And so if we can help you, by the way, if you have any specific individual considerations for this is, again, kind of a flyby. But if you've got specific needs that we can help address or work through with you, reach out to us. We'd love to help. You can always get in touch with us at our website, imagonutrition.com. That's imago.com/contact. That's a form that will send an email to both Danielle and I if we can help you through any specific goals that you have for yourself, for your family, as it comes to nutrition and wellness, of course. And so with that, if this episode was helpful for you, which we hope it was, that's why we do it, feel free to subscribe. We would love to have you as a part of the podcast family, and that will make sure that you get our new episodes automatically on your device. And so leave us a review as well, if you don't mind. Let us know how we're doing. We love seeing that, and share it with a friend. That would be one of the ways that we can help more people with this podcast, which is, again, why we do what we do. So if you're on social media, you can follow us. We're at Imago Nutrition, IMAGO. So across all the platforms, at Imago Nutrition. And as always, a big thanks to the band Happy Pill for our theme song, Thinkin Bout Food.